Welcome. I see that we have one person join us. We have about 5 minutes until the webinar officially starts, but for one attendee that we have now, as you can already see on the screen, we have the cameras and screen share disabled for participants because this is a webinar format. You are muted currently, and we'll have instructions for you to unmute yourself later on, and then ways that you can comment. You can leave and rejoin the meeting at any time. And then we'll have plenty of opportunities for questions and answers provided throughout the presentation. This presentation is also being recorded, so we'll have that posted up after this meeting on the website that you see on the slide there. And that website actually gives information about all sorts of park planning projects. So you can find out more about this project as well as other park planning projects there. Oh, that's okay. You're more than welcome. Typically, we have more people join early, but for whatever reason, you're the first one tonight. And we're happy that you're here. Welcome. I see that somebody else has joined. We're going to wait a few more minutes to see if others join. In the meantime, I'll just go over the slide with you. This is a webinar format, which means that your video cameras and screen share are disabled. You're muted for the time being, but we'll give instructions for you to unmute yourself later on. You can leave and rejoin the meeting at any time. So if you need to go do something and come back, you're welcome to do that. We will have multiple opportunities for questions and answers. So we'll be taking breaks throughout the presentation to answer questions. And then all of this is being recorded and will be posted on the website that you see on the slide here. It has information about this project along with other projects related to parks. So I encourage you to go look at that if you're interested in parks in general. So wait a few more minutes just because we only have a few people that have joined so far. Yeah, maybe we'll just give it one more minute and get started just to honor people's time for those of you who did show up at 7. And I know that you have a life to get to, so we want to help you get back to that. So maybe just one more minute to see if other people join. Oh, great. I see that we're having other people join. Well, welcome to those of you who just joined. As you can see on this slide, we just have a few technology things to go over with you right at the beginning. This is a webinar format, so your video cameras and your screen share is disabled. Right now you are muted, but there will be instruction on how to unmute yourself later on as we get into conversation about this. You can leave and rejoin the meeting at any time if you need to. We'll be taking breaks throughout the presentation for you to ask questions, and you can ask questions through the question and answer feature. I'll be talking about that a little bit more later. And then the presentation is being recorded and will be posted at the site that you see listed on the screen.
Thanks, Heather. I think we can probably get going here. I just want to welcome everyone to the Gallup Park Bridge, Road, and Trail virtual public meeting. So thanks everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. So I can start out with just going through some introductions. My name is Hillary Hansel. I'm a landscape architect and park planner with the city here on the left. And then Heather, who is just speaking, is one of our community engagement specialists also here at the city, and she'll be helping us moderate this new Zoom format we have for our public meetings. And then we also have members from our consultant team joining us here today. We have a few people from Smith Group, Cheryl Zulig, the lead landscape architect, Sarah Zelnick, Emily McKinnon, and then Bob Breen from Wade Trim is a structural engineer joining us as well. And then so why we're here today is we know Gallup Park is a really beloved place, and because these changes are going to be happening to the vehicle bridge and Park Road, we know this is like an important gateway to the park. It's part of the experience. So it's really important for us to hear from the community. So we want to hear your thoughts and your feedback on some of the preliminary designs we've developed. And then after this meeting, we'll also be posting a meeting summary and a recording of this meeting on our project website, which is shown here at a2gov.org/park planning. And then if at any time after the meeting you'd like to reach out to me to discuss things further, if you have any additional questions, you can reach me. My email and phone number is listed below, and we'll also have that again later in the presentation as well. And so today we're just going to start out. Right now we've gone through introductions. I'll pass it off to Heather here shortly to just go over some of how this Zoom webinar format's going to work. And then we just have a couple of slides talking about the project background, the reason that we're doing this project. And then I'll be passing it off to our consultant team to talk about how we've developed community-driven goals based on community feedback. And we'll spend the bulk of our time talking about schematic design, which is really concept design, preliminary designs we've developed. And we have designs for both the vehicle bridge, kind of the broader area around the bridge, and then also a section of the park road and trail. So our goal is really to kind of share with you our preliminary thoughts and hear what you like, what concerns you have, what questions you have. And we'll be using all of that feedback as we go into making decisions further on and refining these designs. And there will be multiple opportunities to provide feedback. So after each section we present, we'll have time for discussion, Q&A, and then we have a few poll questions as well. And so with that, Heather can kind of walk us through this Zoom meeting format a bit.
Sure. Yeah. So many of you are probably already familiar with all of this because we've all been in the world of Zooming for months now. But just in case, we want to give you instructions on how to interact with this. So you can raise and lower your hand. You click on the icon at the bottom, which is just the little hand thing. And so if you want to ask a question, and then we can have you unmute yourself to ask a question. But also ask that you submit questions through the Q&A feature that you can see at the bottom. So that way they can be recorded in a written way. And then I'll read those out loud, and whoever is appropriate can respond to whatever question that you have. For those of you, I actually don't think we have anybody on the phone, but if anybody on the line right now needs to use a phone instead, you would hit *9 to raise your hand, and then we would call you out by your last 3 digits on your phone. And then this page is because we are trying to advance more civil forums in our community, which I think all of us would like. And so we have started presenting ground rules at our meetings. This is one version of our ground rules, which is commit to learning and avoid speculation. So we really hope that all of you ask questions because we want to explore the issue together and make sure that we all have a full understanding of what each other's concerns and wishes are. Then we all just ask that we remember the dignity of other people. And with that, we ask that you critique ideas, not people, and are thoughtful about your language. Everybody feels included and not alienated. If you have other ideas about ground rules, what you would like to see in the future of our public meetings, then I encourage you to put that in the chat feature or in the Q&A feature. We appreciate any feedback that you have about that, or any feedback that you have about what would make it easier for you to engage with the city more. And then Hillary, if you don't mind, I was going to launch our demographic poll a little bit earlier, but since there were a few people on the line, it wouldn't have allowed you to be so anonymous. But now that we have enough people, I'd like to launch that. Are doing these demographic surveys now so we can get a sense of who we're reaching so that we have a better sense of who we're not reaching. And then trying to learn techniques to hear from the voices that we haven't been able to hear from. So with that, I will launch this poll. This is completely optional. You don't have to do it, but we do appreciate it if you don't mind filling out the demographic survey. So here it is, and we'll just take a minute to do that.
And Heather, I think you mentioned this, but this is totally anonymous, right? The poll.
This is completely anonymous, yeah.
Great.
So we'll give this one more minute. Yeah, we're getting some feedback that there's no way to submit the survey unless you answer number 4, and I apologize for that. There should have been an option that I put on there, prefer not to answer, so I apologize for that. You can, if you're still willing to do the survey, I suppose you can put in the last answer, other or multiracial. Okay, 10 more seconds. All right, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you indulging us on that.
Great. So just wanted to give you a little background about why we're doing this project. Really, the basis of this is the bridge, which has reached the end of its useful life. This is the wooden vehicle bridge that you'd cross over if you're driving in off Fuller Road. So this is in need of replacement in the next 3 to 5 years. And in part of looking at the bridge, we know that there'll be adjustments made to the Park Road and the trail as it interacts with the bridge on either side. And so we wanted to look a little bit more holistically because there's also this area shown in red, kind of in the graphic on the right. There's this section of Park Road and Border to Border Trail that is also in need of renovation. And so we wanted to be sure that whatever design improvements we make kind of at the bridge and in the surrounding area will also make sense with what we'd like to see for future improvements along the rest of the road and trail. So that's why we're looking kind of holistically at this whole area. And the goal here is to develop a master plan for this area that we can use to apply for grants and also help guide these projects as we move forward. And so the community's engagement is really important to us. We want to ensure that these areas all work for you, that they meet the community's needs. So we appreciate everyone coming here and participating. And then, so what we've done to get to this point is we began our community engagement with an online survey this summer. We were really pleased to have over 570 responses. And so we've taken what input we received. We heard what you liked, what's working, what's not quite working, what improvements you guys, ideas for improvement you had. And we use those all to develop a series of community-driven goals for the project that we'll talk about here in a little bit. And those goals really helped us develop our preliminary design. So it's really important feedback. We appreciate everything. And again, this master plan will ultimately be likely constructed in phases. So we expect the bridge would likely be replaced in the first phase of construction, and then improvements to the road and trail would be done in subsequent phases, kind of as funding becomes available. And so with that, I'll pass it off to our consultant team to help walk us through our preliminary designs and our goals that we developed.
Thanks, Hillary. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Zelenak, landscape architect with Smith Group. And one of our first steps in our schematic design was to review the survey and to see what themes or trends emerged about the project area. So what we heard was that the new bridge should have a park-like aesthetic. We should encourage slow speeds on the bridge and the park road. And we need to reduce congestion overall on the site. There's an area where the B2B trail intersects on the south side of the bridge. There's a lot of congestion on the bridge, and there's congestion on the B2B trail with it only being about 8 feet wide. Another goal we would like to have is that we heard is to improve the experience along the trail. We heard that this area doesn't feel much like the rest of Gallup Park. And we would like to reduce conflicts between parking spaces and the non-motorized traffic. Currently, it's on-street parking, so there's a lot of in and out, backing out, and people crossing the street to get to the trail. So we'll walk you through the different areas that we will take a look at. First, we're going to look at the bridge. Next, we'll take a look at the entry road and the trail crossing design. Thirdly, we'll look at the park road design. And lastly, we'll look at how the B2B trail connects to the Gallup Loop Trail. So first, starting out with the vehicular bridge, we have 4 options. Oh, before we get into the options, we have design criteria that these came out of the survey and with meeting from representatives from the city of Ann Arbor. So keep the park-like character. We want to incorporate wood and natural elements as much as we can and retain the same charm and feel. We would like to keep it 1 lane to encourage slow speeds and calm traffic, reduce congestion by providing more space for pedestrians and cyclists. We want to improve the experience of crossing over the bridge and increase load capacity. Currently, the largest emergency vehicles cannot cross over the bridge. We like to have them be able to get to the rest of the park. And the track bridge jumping, we know that is a concern in this area. The aesthetics for the bridge, we heard that we want to incorporate as much wood as we can. So we love the idea of having a timber vehicular rail. For the pedestrian rail, incorporate wood posts, but allow it to be transparent so that when you're driving over it, you can still see the river. But maybe something that's anti-climb with a paneling. For the stone abutments and the piers, we would like to use something that could fit in with the existing aesthetic of Gallup Park. There's a lot of existing cobble already on site, and so we think using something like that as a stone veneer would be great. So when we took a look at what the structure of the bridge should be, we're considering 3 different options. First is a timber bridge. Some of the benefits to a timber bridge is that it really has that park-like character and it matches the rest of Gallup Park, the aesthetic, the rest of the wooden bridges in the park. However, the current bridge is only 40 years old, and for it to be long-lasting, it requires ongoing maintenance. And then in order to achieve the loading requirements, we need the beam depth would have to increase to be 4 feet thick, which would raise up the road and would cause a lot of disruption on the site. There's also additional maintenance with all the extra connections. Steel and concrete bridges, these are longer lasting than timber bridges with significantly less maintenance. They last about double the length of the current bridge. The greater material strength of these bridges means that our beam depth wouldn't have to be as deep, so there would be less site disruption. However, steel has a little bit more maintenance than concrete because of the painting. All right, now into the options. So the existing bridge, just as a benchmark, is a 12-foot wide lane. and 2 5-foot wide walks on either side. Here are some photos of the elevation and what it feels like when you're crossing the bridge. So our first option we're calling the Gallup Loop Bridge, and we call it that because it gives priority to the Gallup Loop that goes around the Geddes Pond. So this is similar to the existing bridge in that it's 12 foot wide, but we are expanding the path on the west side 1 foot to 6 feet. And on the east side, we are incorporating a 14-foot wide shared use path. This would allow cyclists and pedestrians enough room. And you can see here, we're starting to incorporate some of the wood elements like the timber that would separate vehiculars and non-motorized traffic. Also, some wood elements we would like to explore is some boardwalk. You can see this tan color and this hollow little area. So you would still get the experience of kind of walking on wood and having that hollow sound. Option B is a symmetrical bridge. And so what we did is we took the 5-foot walks on either side of the bridge and expanded it to 10-foot wide. This option doesn't give any preference to one side or the other. This one's nice because it has, we know the west side view is really nice. The east side has a view to the Huron Parkway. Option C is bike lanes option. So here, pedestrians and cyclists are separated. They have a dedicated bike lane. The vehicles will still have a single lane, but this time it's narrowed down to 10-foot wide. The bike lanes would be 5-foot wide, and then the walk area, we would still give an extra 1 foot from what is existing. Lastly, we are exploring 2 bridges. We heard a lot in the survey. The word car came up a lot when we asked, what don't you like about the bridge? And it was because it accommodated cars. And we think this would help with the experience of cyclists and pedestrians crossing over. And it almost becomes an amenity of the park. So this cross section is showing them really close together, but there would be a good amount of space between them. It would still be a single lane for the vehicles, but it would be 14-foot wide so that there would still be enough room if a cyclist was to be on it as well. All right, we will pause here for pass over to Heather for some comments and questions.
All right. Yeah, so no questions have come in the Q&A feature, but if you have a question, please go ahead and submit it there, or you can raise your hand. Yeah, no questions for the time being, but I think if a question comes to you a little bit later on, oh wait, we have an incoming question. Let's see, and it reads, I'm intrigued by the 2 bridge option. Would that be significantly more costly?
Yeah, and I can answer that, Heather. So yeah, our preliminary cost estimates don't show that the 2 bridge option is significantly more expensive. We're looking at maybe, $150,000, $200,000 more, but overall for the project, construction only for the bridges, we're probably in the realm of around $1.5 million. It could easily end up closer to 2 with engineering costs factored in, construction oversight and testing. But we did not see, the 2 bridge option is slightly more expensive, but it's not anything really significant when looking at these bigger numbers.
And then we do have somebody with their hand raised, so I'm going to unmute you. So that's Karen. If you can actually unmute yourself, you have that capability. So Karen, if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask your question. I guess while we're waiting, we'll answer another question that came in through the Q&A. Are all 4 options concrete bridges?
Yeah, so we're still exploring what the material we'll use for these are. I think right now a lot of them are shown as concrete with some sort of decking. If we were to go with the 2-bridge option, where you have a separate vehicle bridge and pedestrian bridge, it's much more likely that the pedestrian bridge could be a different material than the vehicle bridge, just because it won't have to carry the same loading requirements that a vehicle bridge would need to meet.
Oh, and then we have a question.
So I'd say,
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, if you wanted to finish that thought, I was just going to bring up another question.
I was going to say, I think we're leaning towards concrete or steel just because of the lower maintenance needs, the longevity. It's a much longer lasting material than timber, but we're still looking at timber and timber elements because we know that's important to the character, of these park bridges.
The next question that we have coming in is, how will the final decision be made?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things to weigh with this. Cost is one of them, but one of them is also just hearing from the public. And so that's why this meeting is important. So I'll say that, this part of the process is really at the kind of high level master plan level. And that, what comes out of this will then go into the next phase, which is more detailed design development and engineering. And so whatever design we ultimately end up with, it could easily, it could easily be a combination of these, or it can change through that design and engineering process. But yeah, we're still at the beginning stages. These are kind of our first step of preliminary design. So we're hoping to hear from the public. So thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
And we have 2 more questions that came in. And the first one is, what kind of clearance considerations were used for waterway kayaking traffic? Would it be higher than the existing?
That's a good question. Yeah, Bob.
If I could answer, we looked at various options, and depending on the material used as far as the beams go, we could increase the underclearance somewhat. We're trying to maintain a minimum requirement that's or an underclearance that's currently out there right now, and that's the problem with using deeper beams. You're going to encroach on that unless you push them up in the air, but then you end up with the problem of impacting the approaches and raising them up much higher. So it's a balancing act, but we are looking to either maintain or improve where we can on the underclearance to the water.
Thank you. The next question is, with option C, will there be a way to prevent 2 cars from attempting to cross at the same time?
Yeah, so I mean, option C is probably, that's option C. I don't know if the options are showing up on your screen, but option C is with the bike lanes and the vehicle lane. So I would say with that, it's probably the most similar to the current bridge. We would probably have signs out saying that, vehicles must yield. I can't say that someone might not attempt to cross, but for the most part, I think there's kind of the existing standard, which is people know who visit the park frequently that you yield. And then I'd also hope that with bike lane striping, kind of outlining that there's just a single vehicle lane, that'll also deter people from trying to drive across at the same time. Fortunately, it's a short bridge, so the wait typically isn't too long to get across.
And then the next question is, 3 of the options are 37 feet wide. Is there some rationale for the width?
I think we're trying to stay as close to the existing bridge width as possible, trying to keep that quaint kind of character about it and not make the bridge feel too large. I don't remember quite off my hand what the existing bridge width is, but I think we're trying to keep them as narrow as possible.
Just real quick, the existing bridge is 24 feet or a little over 24 feet wide. But with the larger or the wider shared use paths in some cases, as well as the walkways, that has increased it. And the 37 also incorporates the railings, the widths needed for the railings at both the vehicular and the pedestrian railings as well.
Yeah, and sorry, Bob, I missed you when you said the existing bridge. How wide was it again? It was 20.
A bit over 24 feet, 24 and a half, something like that.
24.
You got 12 foot lane, 2 5-foot walks, the beam widths and the handrails take it a little bit over 24 feet wide overall.
Yeah, and a lot of these other widths are kind of standard. So 5 feet's kind of standard for an on-street bike lane. 12 feet with 2-foot shoulders. I'm sorry, 10 feet with 2-foot shoulders for the 14-foot shared use path is kind of another standard. So that's where some of these widths are being pulled from.
Okay, and then we have a comment and a question. It seems that the pedestrian bridge would lose that nice west view and would only get the view of the other bridge. Any suggestions about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's potentially an issue. Fortunately, you'd be looking at the bridge, but if there's not many cars on it, hopefully you would still be able to just see past that. But it would change the view, definitely. Yeah, and I think that's one of the drawbacks for that one. Although you probably get a nicer pedestrian experience with the additional space and that, and some of the other options. There's more room for people to linger, to kind of stop in the bridge, enjoy views. Some of the other options have more narrow walks, so that's kind of getting into the pros and cons of the different options.
Hillary, if I could just add one quick comment. What's shown in this graphic, though, is not representative of how it is actually, how we perceived it in plan. The pedestrian bridge was more on a skew to the east, and there's more of a distance between the two bridges than what's shown here. This was just it was kind of condensed for the sake of size. But
yeah,
in actuality, they're much further apart than what's shown here.
Yeah, that's a great point, Bob. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, this is more diagrammatic. These two bridges wouldn't be this close together, and we'll see that a little bit more in the plan views.
Okay, and I think that's all the questions for the time being.
Great. All right, so I think we're moving on to the polls, and our first poll question is just asking, which is more important to you personally, our attendees? Do you like the idea of having cars or vehicles separated from pedestrians and cyclists, kind of as the option shown on the left, or do you like having pedestrians separated from both cars and bikes, more like the option shown on the right? So.
All right, I'm launching that poll, so go ahead.
Great.
Maybe about one more minute. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And there's the results.
All right, so it looks like from our small group, there's a slight preference for separating vehicles from cyclists and pedestrians. So thanks for everyone for sharing and participating in the poll. All right, and then I think we have one more poll to get to next.
Mhm.
So this is looking at all 4 of the options that were presented. So just asking which one you prefer. Option A with the kind of extended shared use path on the Gallup Loop side to the east. Option B, where they're both expanded kind of shared use pathways for bikes and pedestrians on either side of the bridge. Option C, where you have bikes separated into bike lanes and the on-street bike lanes separated from pedestrian sidewalks, or option D, having the separate 2 bridges.
Okay, I'm going to launch that poll. Okay, about 30 more seconds. All right, 3, 2, 1. Looks like 2 bridges came out ahead.
Yeah, so it looks like about half our respondents preferred the 2 bridges. Second place, the bike lane option, option C. And then third was the symmetrical bridge option. So thank you. Great, so with that, maybe before we move on, are there any other questions about the bridge options? Moving on.
I am not seeing any questions in the Q&A feature. Let's see if anybody has their hands raised. I don't see any hands raised right now.
Okay, well, happy to be here tonight, and thanks for joining us. My name is Cheryl Zulik. I'm a landscape architect working with Sarah at Smith Group, and I'm going to review some of our thoughts and options related to the area around the bridge, and then also options for the park road and for the border-to-border trail. So when we had our survey, we got a fair amount of feedback, and I think Sarah has mentioned a little bit about this, but there were kind of 4 challenges that we were hearing from this part of the park on the north and the south sides of the bridge. And the first had to do with the parking. And as you can see in this aerial and probably have experienced, the parking is pull in directly off of the park road and on both sides, and that causes congestion with traffic. It also causes some concern, safety concern for pedestrians, with kids getting out of the car and having to cross over the street to get to the trail or get to the river. And so we heard that concern many times from those 570 responses. So that was something we wanted to work on resolving as we were looking at this. We also heard that there is a pinch point on the south side of the bridge where the border-to-border trail crosses it. And that border-to-border trail is very close, right next to the bridge itself. And the popularity of the trail and of the park, just a lot of conflicts, runners, bikes, cars, strollers, you name it. We were hearing concerns at that intersection. The other thing that was a challenge here is that once you're on the road, there's really no good place to turn around. So if you're on the north side and you haven't crossed the bridge and you want to turn around, that's pretty challenging. And similar issue on the south side of the bridge, there is no real turnaround spot. You'd have to pull into a parking space if one's available, or go all the way down to the east end and turn around. And then lastly, what you'll see labeled here is unofficial river access. Again, the popularity of the park and the popularity of the Argo Cascades has really created a real great increase in kayaking and tubers and the use, the river use of the park. And so there's a lot of places where folks are getting out of the river, in a bunch of different locations, and that weren't really intended or designed for that. So we're seeing a lot of erosion along the river edge. So the next slide that you see are some ideas that we're proposing to solve some of those challenges. The first one is the parking, and both on the north and the south side, you'll see that what we're suggesting is pulling the parking off of the park road itself. So on the north side, it would be shifted over to the west side of the peninsula, and would be one way, and be done in such a way then that if you park there, you don't have to cross the street. It's much safer and a lot less congestion. And you can see that you could use that parking lot as a turnaround, right? So if you pull out of the parking lot, you could turn back around and head up to Fuller. Similarly, same concept on the south side would be the off-street parking, again separated from the park road itself. So that's one of the recommendations. The other thing from a congestion standpoint for that trail, you can see we're suggesting to shift it south of the new bridge quite a ways. And what that does is gives folks time, a little bit more time to react, and also folks time to actually see and improve the visibility as you're crossing over the bridge. The other thing would be doing there is to tabletop or raise the trail crossing in that location and to mark it. So vehicles would slow down, essentially a traffic calming device in that location. And then for those new unofficial river access points, what we're proposing on both sides of the bridge and also along the river itself is to install stone stepped terraces that you can actually use to get in or out of the water, or just as an overlook, or for fishing. These spots are really popular for fishing as well. So these would provide access and also fishing opportunities in the park along this section. So then we have 3 options for the park road and the trail. So I want to walk through those with you. But first, I'm going to tell you the design criteria. Sorry. Again, these really came out of what we heard from the community. The B2B trail, really popular, used by bicyclists who are commuting from one side of the city to the other, as well as runners and children and families. And so the goal is to increase the capacity or the size of the border-to-border trail so that it can accommodate more people. We want to add more trees to shade the path so that we're improving the comfort of the path through that section, and provide those river access points that I just talked about on the previous slide. And then let's think about this section of the park as a park rather than just a big drive, right? And so think about this as a park and an experience in the park. And so we have some thoughts related to that. Folks already drive slow on this road. They drive slow because of those big speed humps. And so any new solution, we'd want to make sure also had traffic calming devices and continue to encourage those slow speeds. We did hear that there are places where the road and the border-to-border trail are too close together. And so if we could separate those again to improve that park-like experience for non-motorized users. And then the last one is just recognizing that there are a whole variety of users in that area, higher speed commuter bicyclists, from folks who are just recreational trail users, or families, folks learning how to ride a bike, right? And we just want to look at opportunities to reduce conflicts in that area with them. So the first option is not the option, it's actually the existing cross section. Sorry about that. This is what's out there right now. So if you look on the right of the cross section where the river is, there's generally about a 15-foot buffer between the river and the existing B2B trail. It gets a little wider in some spots, a little narrower, but it's generally right in that area. The trail right now is 8 feet wide. And then there is space between the trail and the road, sometimes as narrow as 4.5 feet. And sometimes, you know, it can get up to about 12 feet or so. But when it's 4.5 feet wide, it's, you know, it's really difficult to even put a tree in something that narrow, right? The drive is 20 feet wide right now. And then the space between the edge of the drive and the bridge at the railroad, or I'm sorry, the fence at the railroad varies. It's about 20 feet to about 50 feet. So it varies along the road corridor there. So our first option that we wanted to show you is, we call it option A, the cycle track cross section. And I'll just walk through this with you from the same direction, from the river and the buffer. All of these options really maintain, or suggesting that we maintain that buffer, that natural buffer to the river. It's really important from an environmental quality to make sure that we're managing stormwater and have that green buffer along that. So any improvements along this road would really start at the existing edge of the pavement and work towards the railroad itself. So this section or option increases the border to border by 2 feet, so it goes up to 10 feet. That's consistent with the border to border that got widened a couple years ago between Gallup and the dam, Dixboro Dam, yeah. East of here. So that was widened to 10 feet a couple of years ago. So this would do the same thing. We would also then set a minimum width between the bridge, or between the trail and the road, of about 10.5 feet. That would allow us enough room to collect stormwater off the road, which, as you know, right now, a lot of that stormwater actually gets trapped in the road right now. We would rather take it into a swale and then manage that naturally. And then it also gives us room to put shade trees there to improve the experience for the trail. In this option, there would be still a 20-foot wide road, two 10-foot wide lanes. And then right next to that would be the cycle track, which is 2 5-foot bike lanes, or dedicated bike lanes. Sometimes that cycle track would be right against the road when it's pretty tight, but and when that's the case, we would have bollards separating those. When there is more room, then we would have a planted buffer in that location. The cycle track here gives folks the opportunity to use this section really for those kind of higher speed commuters. So if they don't want to be on the wider 10-foot wide path, then they could be and would be encouraged to use this cycle track on the other side of the road. The other thing that we're proposing on a couple options, this one first is planting bump outs. And I think it shows a little bit better the idea of a planting bump out. And you can see some in this, and you know, some examples of this, is to provide, they would be located on alternate sides of the road as you go down the trail, and they would take the place of the speed humps. And what they do is they are traffic calming, because you have to maneuver around them, right? So it slows traffic down. It's also nice because it adds landscape, and actually could be stormwater management also. So we could have some kind of bio islands in here to manage stormwater as well. So that's what, on this option, that's what we're suggesting. So what does that look like in plan view? So on this sketch, the Huron River, Huron Parkway Bridge is to the left of this slide. And from the river side, you can start to see kind of on the top of the page, that would be the buffer, the natural buffer. And then the 10-foot wide border to border trail would be just south of that. And then you can start to see the trees and the new median or swale area between the trail and the road. And then the road itself would be 20 feet wide. And then you can see where we're suggesting those alternating planter bump outs. So they're not, you know, one of those pictures showed them really close together. They're spaced, they would be spaced further apart, but again, provides just enough traffic calming. Then a green strip when there's room, or bollards, and then you'll see the cycle track between the road and the railroad fence. So the other thing on this is we heard from the community that they were interested in doing some improvements underneath the bridge, and that space right now is already used. I mean, it's got benches there, it's got riprap there, people fish there, they actually park in the dirt and go and use that space. So what we're suggesting here is to formalize that a little bit, right? So let's bring some parking here just to help distribute parking along the road, but then also add stone steps down, terraced steps down to the river, so that people can actually stand on those stones and use those for fishing and for hanging out, right? So that the idea there is to kind of create a little there in that spot. On the next slide, I want to show you what this option would look like on the easterly parking lot. So the idea that the cycle track here would actually stay on the south side of the parking lot and avoid, so rather than having to come up and go up to where the border to border is now between the playground and the parking lot, we would encourage those higher speed commuters to stay south of that, so that they're not interacting with that pedestrian and kind of kid family oriented focus that's on the north side of that parking lot. So essentially it would split and join back to the border on the east side of the parking lot. So that's the first option. The second option is option B, the bike lanes. And in this option, the green buffer and the border to border trail, exact same recommendations. We would widen those, still widen the trail there, so it would be 10-foot wide. Still have the 10.5-foot swale, right? But now instead of a cyclotrack, this suggests that you have 2 5-foot bike lanes actually within the road corridor, right? And then your space from the bike lane to the railroad fence. This option also is suggesting the planting bump outs as the traffic calming device. And in the plan view, this is what it would look like. So again, from the river, the buffer to the border to border trail is the same. That planting swale is the same to the edge of the road. And then you can start to see where those separate bike lanes on either side of the road are. And those planting areas or bump outs are still there. In this case, what happens is as a bicyclist, you actually ride between them and the edge of the pavement, which I know is, for me, this is one of my rides home actually, and I ride on this road a lot. I like the idea of having a little bit of separation, there as a bicyclist. But so same traffic calming as the first option, and on-street bike lanes is what this option is really about. And then similar solution here on the east side parking lot. The border to border would also be extended there on the south side. And then instead of the bicyclists, instead of accessing the cycle track, they would get onto the road at that point and use the road, the bike lanes on the road. Okay, and then option C is advisory bike lanes. And I don't know, some of you might have seen these or have used these in Ann Arbor. We have a few of them in Ann Arbor. And essentially advisory bike lanes are dashed bike lanes that allow actually having bike lanes on very narrow roads. And they work by two-way, so it's two-way traffic, right? But as you're driving, you're generally driving towards the center of the street. Okay, just like you would in a residential street, like, you had parked cars on either side. But then when an oncoming car comes to you in your vehicle, people in the cars will move over into the advisory bike lane, which is why they're striped versus solid. And the motorists would yield to people on bikes. So it's what it does is it allows you to have a a narrower cross section, a narrower pavement section. So all the other two options, the road and pavement width, are 30 feet in that section. Here, that it's only 22 feet. So one of the reasons we wanted to get your feedback on this is that, this is a pretty narrow strip of land between the river and the railroad, and we're trying to balance the use of all of these folks in here. But we want to do it in a way that it doesn't seem like a giant highway that's, paved from river to railroad. So this is a concept we wanted to get your feedback on, and knowing that it would remove 8 feet of impervious area and road on this section of the section. In this one, there's not enough room to put those bump outs in this narrow lane. So what we would be proposing here is to put speed humps in like what are in there now. Same solution. What this looks like in plan view, again, the border to border and that space between the river, or border to border and the road, is the same. And then you just have a narrower road section, and then more green, fundamentally end up with 8 more feet of green space between the road and the railroad that we could plant, right? And then same solution on the east end as well, that the trail would come to the south, and you could use that as a bicyclist to connect as you're heading further to the east. So those are the 3 options, and we'd love to get your feedback on this.
Yeah, so I'm open to questions right now, so feel free to put a question in the Q&A feature or raise your hand.
Yeah, and I'll just start out by just talking about some of these a little bit more. So option C for advisory lanes, like Cheryl mentioned, one of the nice things is that it keeps the pavement section more narrow. It's also pretty similar to how the road functions right now, with cars and bicyclists sharing the space, although there aren't striped bike lanes. So striping those would help formalize that this is territory for bikes too, and make cars aware of that. And I think this also, visually having the bike lane striped will help kind of visually narrow the street, so that that's another traffic calming mechanism too.
So we do have one question about the advisory bike lanes. Would there still be speed bumps? And if so, could you consider bike-sized cutouts for the bumps?
Yeah, I think that we kind of put them as optional speed humps. So yeah, I think that's something that we wanted to get people's feedback on, because whether we thought that striping the bike lanes would be enough visually to kind of calm traffic, but I think that's a great point. We could always look into having speed humps more in the vehicle part of the lane. It might be a little odd, I guess, as I talk through it, if the car is then going, yielding behind a bike into the bike lane. I guess you might have one tire up and one tire down. So I'm not exactly sure how that would work, but I think speed humps are kind of an optional thing here. So it'd be great to hear what people think.
We do have a comment and a question. The comment is advisory bike lanes might work if auto drivers respected bicyclists, but that seems questionable in my experience. And then the following question is also, how do the buffers work with 2-lane roads?
Buffers, the planting buffers, the planting bump outs, I think that's what they're talking about.
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's a little hard to tell here in the sections, but in those areas the road does kind of pinch down for just that little piece, and again, it's something that the cars just kind of will have to yield to each other and move around that obstacle. It's kind of like how the vehicle bridge functions right now. The cars slow down, they make sure no one else is crossing, and then you kind of go through. So creating those points where cars have to slow down, have to navigate other obstacles.
Mm-hmm. And then we have a question. Less pavement is nice, but layout A is so nice for bicyclists. Is there a way to use some kind of permeable pavement to reduce water issues?
Yeah, that's a great comment. You know, I will say we've kind of struggled with some permeable pavement here at the city, and just because it does require some maintenance, maintenance kind of vacuuming out to keep the porosity of the pavement so that it does infiltrate water. But I think it's always something that could be explored.
And those are all the questions for now.
It looks like we might have someone in the chat as well.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, some comments. Intrigued by C, but another new thing for drivers to learn. If there's a lot of paint on the road, could work. Will cycle path A be snowplowed, and in the winter is not C better? I think is the question.
Yeah, I would assume that the cyclo track would be paved in the winter. We do have certain, popular segments of trail that are maintained year round, such as the border-to-border trail, and I would see that area also being maintained.
Okay, that's all the questions I'm seeing for the moment.
Great. Well, I know we have a couple of polls just to get everyone's feedback, so we can jump into the next poll question, which is really, which option do you prefer? So do you prefer option A, the cyclotrack, option B with the on-street bike lanes, or option C with the narrower advisory lanes?
Okay, about 20 more seconds. Okay, 3, 2, 1. All right, looks like cycle track is in the lead, followed by advisory lanes.
Thanks, everyone.
Let me share those results with everyone. There you go.
Yeah,
So
about 3/4 prefer the cyclotrack, and then about 1/4 prefer the advisory bike lanes.
Heather, I was wondering, would it be okay? I would love to hear from the group what makes this, if you did prefer the cyclotrack over the bike lanes, what did you like? What do you like better about it between option A and B? If anybody was willing to share their thoughts on that, that would be great.
Yeah, if anybody's willing, you can raise your hand and then we can unmute you. We have Larry Duck. And then I think you need to unmute yourself.
Right, did that do it?
Yep, that did it. Great.
Yeah, I'm Larry Duck. I'm with the Washington Bicycling and Walking Coalition, and I guess you'd say I'm an avid bicyclist. I bike a lot on road as well as on trail, but I always like a good trail if one's available. And I think one of our considerations has been trying to make biking more attractive to more people. A lot of intense bicyclists don't mind riding on the road, but people who might want to get into biking but don't are afraid of cars. So anything to get them away from cars is helpful. So I think the cycle track in this example gives people a feeling of being more away from cars and safer. So I would see it as attracting more people. We kind of divide bicyclists up into the group of there's the strong and fearless, which is like 1% of the potential bicyclists, and there's enthused and confident, maybe 7-10%. But then there's this group of like 60% of people who are interested but concerned, and those are the people that we'd like to get into bicycling. And so I think a separated facility like the cycle track is more attractive to them and helps to get more people like that into bicycling.
And Thank you, Larry. We also have Anne who has her hand up. So Anne, if you can now unmute yourself and talk.
Hi, can you hear?
Mhm.
Yeah, I liked the cyclotrack because at the two ends, it connected much more seamlessly to the existing border-to-border trail. And so that's why I preferred it.
Thank you. We also have a comment in the chat that reads, "It is very hard to maintain a decent biking speed when navigating around walkers and families." All right, did anybody else want to chime in?
Heather, I was just going to read in the Q&A, there was a comment that for someone who voted for the cyclotrack, they thought there was more opportunity to pass other cyclists safely with the added lane, so you could kind of maneuver around. It also sounded like someone made a comment that they wish these surveys or poll questions had a rank choice, because although they picked A, which is the cyclotrack, C, the advisory bike lanes, would be their second choice. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think with the cyclotrack, you know, one of our thoughts was, you know, there might be people who don't feel comfortable being in the road and that might continue to just bike on the border-to-border trail, which is totally appropriate, although that space is shared with runners and walkers, you know, and all sorts of other traffic. So I think there is, you know, still that option for people who are less comfortable. But I definitely agree that having the buffer of bollards between traffic or some planted lawn space definitely can help just make people feel safer. Great.
All right, anybody else have a comment?
Yeah, I think, am I still unmuted?
You
Yes.
are, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just, I'm glad that you're looking at how to separate the bicyclists in this area from pedestrians, because it's so busy there that it's difficult now to bike on the trail and difficult for pedestrians. And so I was, before I saw what you're proposing here, I was thinking you would just widen the path, as is done some places, to have like maybe a 5-foot bike lane, 5-foot or 5-foot pedestrian lane and 2 5-foot bike lanes on the same pavement path. But the idea of separating it here, I think, is even better. So, but I think just separating that heavy traffic in this popular park here is good in any of these ways, is better than what we have now. But as I said, I kind of prefer the cycle track option. I could live with the others though. The question is how many other people could live with the others, and I think the cycle track might be more attractive to more people. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate it. Great.
Okay, any other comments or questions that people have? Okay, thank you, everyone.
All right, so I think that comes to the end of our all of our options that we presented. So we just wanted to kind of leave this time open for any additional questions, discussion, comments that people might have. And we can always go back to previous slides in the presentation if you'd like to look at the bridge options in more detail, or some of the Park Road options in more detail. Happy to flip back.
All right, we have somebody with a hand up. Roberta, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. My primary concern, no matter what renovations are made, is how the trails are going to be maintained. Because currently it's on certain portions of the trail, it's next to impossible to ride because the trail is so cracked up. And also I have a family member who is a wheelchair user. We used to use Gallup Park regularly, but because of the cracks in the trail, it's not even safe to take a wheelchair out on. So I'm most concerned, no matter what options are chosen, about the ongoing maintenance.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your comment. You know, I will say here at the city, we do struggle with maintaining pathways simply because our park system is an older one, and we do have lots of existing pathways. So it's always a balancing act. That being said, we do have a couple projects currently planned to come up in Gallup Park. So while this is a few years out, next summer we will be, or next spring actually, we'll be repaving a section of trail between the Gallup livery and then heading east towards kind of the boat launch area. And then we're also hoping later next summer and into the fall to repave the section from about where the Gallup vehicle bridge is, heading west to about the Mitchell Field Bridge. So we do know that there's several parts in Gallup Park that are in need of renovation. Just due to budget constraints, a lot of these we end up partnering with others on. So the last segment that was done between the new Universal Access Playground, kind of east to the Dixboro Dam, was one that we received a grant for. And then we're looking, it sounds like maybe our partners at Washtenaw County Parks might assist us with some of this as it's part of the border trail. So I appreciate your comment. It's definitely something we struggle with, but we're working on it. I think Gallup Park will look a lot better in the next year or two. So appreciate that.
Thank you. We do have another person. John, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I just wanted to say every time that I come through this area on my bike, I always am on the road. So, I really appreciate the efforts to kind of segregate the bike path, the high speed through path to some other way. So I think the separated cycle path is a really nice option, but the other, more narrow option, I like that it's less pavement, and it also allows, a cyclist to pretty seamlessly move in and off, on and off of the road, because there typically isn't a lot of car traffic in there. I'm sure on a busy Saturday afternoon, there's a lot of car traffic, but typically there isn't a lot. So, I think the narrow option is, could work, pretty good most of the time. But I guess I just wanted to put another thing about, it's not really the maintenance, but just the length of this project. This is a really critical connector that if this project takes a whole summer, really, cuts off a whole commuter path for a lot of people. So it would just be, if the narrower one is something that can be done in a lot quicker time where we don't lose this critical, commuter connector for a long period of time, that might make it more appealing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I know when we do, we have to close segments of trail, especially the border trail that's so popular and used by commuters. We usually try and sign a detour route. The detours are never as quick or as efficient as the actual trail. And, that's, again, something we struggle with. It's great to repair pathways, but there's always that time period that's an inconvenience. But yeah, I think that's great. I'm sure that there might be some cost and time savings between the options. So that's definitely something we'll look at when comparing them.
Hillary, I would add to that, when we could look at options that actually allows you to, keep the border to border current one in place. And so, for example, if you were doing the cyclotrack, it's kind of like doing a half of a bridge and then the other half of the bridge, right? So are there options to keep some of that in play while some of the construction's happening? And there's probably cost implications to that, but certainly could be explored further down the line.
Yeah, that's a great thought, Cheryl. Definitely we could do the trail first or road first and vice versa. So there's always some pathway open.
And then Larry had another.
Yeah, am I still unmuted? Can you hear me?
You're still unmuted, yep.
Okay, thanks. We're talking about the maintenance of the trail elsewhere, and I'd just like to raise the issue too of completion of the border trail through Ann Arbor in the neighborhood of the Maiden Lane Fuller intersection. There's the 4 bridges in that area with existing underpasses that were built over 30 years ago and planned for trail connections, and they haven't been built. And then there would also be a new bridge over the river between the south side of the river and Riverside Park on the north side to continue the trail through there. It would totally change the nature of that area in terms of both recreational and transportation commuting patterns. So really finishing the trail system that's been planned for decades in that area would really make a difference in the operation of the whole trail. If you have, you're probably, I'm sure you're aware of that plan, Hillary, but if anybody has any questions about that, I'd be happy to share some of the history of that and what's planned.
Yeah, that's a great point, Larry. And I'll also mention, we're always talking to our partners at Washington County Parks who really lead the border-to-border trail completion effort. I know they've recently done a lot of portions of the border-to-border trail out near Dexter area. And so one of the other items that we've been looking at is the potential for a pedestrian tunnel between Vandermeer Park and Huron River Drive or Barton Nature area to kind of make that non-motorized connection below the railroad berm. I know that's, maybe kind of a priority area that we're looking at right now, just kind of an early feasibility study.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Can you still hear me?
Yep, still here.
I haven't muted you yet.
We had a meeting with some of the players on that last week, that's, as you know, there's some outside funding that's on offer for that from the county, from Huron Waterloo Pathways Initiative, and what it sounds like is the city needs to commit to doing something there, to being a partner, both financially and in terms of management. So we got to get that engineering study done and get that built, because that's a key issue there for the whole continuity of the border trail and the safety of people. Right now you have to cross the railroad track there, deal with barriers that were put in the way, and get around. It's an unsafe situation, and I hope we get something done there before somebody's killed by a train, because you can't see the trains coming around underneath that overpass there. So that's, I'm glad you raised that, Hillary. It's a very important project.
Yeah, it's something we've been studying. There's actually a feasibility study. It's just wrapping up now. We're going to be presenting it at PAC next Tuesday, the Park Advisory Commission. And then we'll be hosting a public meeting on that in early December that we'll be scheduling shortly. One key thing that we need to get approval on kind of even before, kind of taking the next step with the tunnel is getting approval to pave a section of the border-to-border trail through Barton Nature area. It's actually a nature preserve, so we'll need to ask the Park Advisory Commission to approve that, because that would be the key connection to that pedestrian trail. But yeah, that's something we've been studying in addition to this portion of the trail as part of the Gallup project. So stay tuned. There'll be more public meetings coming up, more virtual public meetings for everyone to attend.
More Zoom opportunities.
Yeah, right.
We do have another question that came through the Q&A, and that is, how long do you expect the bridge replacement to take?
Gosh, so it'll depend on what bridge option we go with. If we go with a single bridge, kind of replacing the bridges in place, it will be faster than if we do the two bridge option. I'm trying to look here. I know we have some of that information, but the two bridge option also allows for some phasing too. So there's a couple of things we're looking at, both in constructability of the bridge, whether we build part of it first. There's a few different options we're exploring. I think at the minimum, we could expect some disruption. Let's see, maybe in the minimum 4 to 5 months that might not be able to get to that south side of the park. Ideally, we'd like that to be in kind of the off season. So if that closure is able to be through the winter months or outside of peak season, that would be our hope. But there's potentials with all construction projects. It could take up longer. So there'll be plenty of advance notice. And while that section of the park road wouldn't be accessible while the bridge is closed, the Gallup Loop Trail is always available. So there would be other ways to kind of access that part of the park just by foot or bike.
Okay, any other questions or comments that anybody wants to bring forward? Well, if you do think of something later, you can always contact Hillary. I think Hillary's going to be showing her email a little bit later. There you
Yeah.
go. Yes.
Yeah, so feel free if anyone would like to discuss this further, has questions, my email and phone is at the bottom. You know, again, we mentioned earlier on, we'll be providing a summary and a recording on the park planning website. And then really next steps, just so everyone's aware, you know, we'll be working, we have an internal steering committee made up of members from the city and county as well. We'll be sharing the feedback we heard today, refining options. We'd love to have a final plan by the end of the year, early next year. And once we have that, we'll share that with the community as well. And then just as far as timeline for construction, this next year we'll probably be focusing mostly on grant applications and some other kind of coordination work. And then once we have that, we'll kind of get into more detailed design and engineering the following year, kind of getting to the construction document level and permits. So we're really thinking construction at the earliest for the bridge would kind of be in 2023. We would love to be able to do the bridge and road and trail together if we're able to get the funding, but likely would probably be the bridge first, as I mentioned earlier. So that's kind of where we're at right now. But thank you all for coming. We know everyone has a busy schedule and lots of Zoom meetings already, so we appreciate you all taking the time to be here, and we really appreciate your feedback. So thanks so much. Take care.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.